Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tavara ye sodavantava munjantu satang. So this afternoon it's our opportunity to reflect, to look inward, and be the observer, the watcher. So first of all, I wish to express my gratitude and appreciation for the celebration of the past week of my 90th year, and I realize how much work it demanded to have it organized so well and go so smoothly. I haven't heard any complaints from anyone about it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was kind of dreading it, having to deal with so many people, but the actual experience of it was incredibly moving to see the various monks from Thailand and from branch monasteries, monks from the London Buddhist Vihara and Thai temples in England. It was all very wonderful for me, and I really appreciate how you have helped and made that possible. And tomorrow I go to Portugal, and I'll be there about 3 weeks before I come back. And so this will be my last Dhamma talk here until July. So I thought I'd talk about sound of silence, because many people ask me the questions about it, but it's not something that you can say much about, because silence doesn't have words. And so to try to describe it and try to tell you how to realize it yourself is like, sometimes I was afraid of making it more difficult for you. Because we grasp the idea, the word sound of silence, and we want to get it. And people have, I remember on a 10-day retreat here at Amaravati years ago, a woman was desperately trying to get sound of silence for 10 days. I see her straining, sitting on a chair nearby, and straining to hear the sound of silence. And that very effort, that very straining makes it impossible, because illusions are what we have been influenced by. So words, concepts, teachings are sankharas. So when we grasp sankharas, then we keep looking for enlightenment or nibbana or silence, or we get the idea. We want to attain stream entry. But just reflecting on these words create this desire to get them personally. I want to become enlightened. I want to realize nibbana. So the main obstacle is always the sakyaditthi, or the ego. So if we always operate, our meditation centers around, I want to get something from it, pay attention to that. You can't help it, but you can at least witness the feeling of I want to get something that sounds desirable. I want to realize the truth. It sounds very noble, like you should be praised for that. But the ego, to me, is empty. And it's conditioned to want, not want, because the cultural, social conditioning that we've received, even as Buddhists, we create these desires to get rid of suffering and to realize nibbana. So these are noble goals that are created in words. But then the first fetter that blocks us from ever realizing that is sakyaditthi, or what we call the ego. Translate that into ego, the sense of I am, me and mine. And when I was a samanera, I was in Nong Khai before meeting Luang Por Chai. I had insight into suffering and the causes of suffering. I could see, that life in this form is about old age, sickness, death, about wanting something desirable or not wanting something you don't like. I could agree with this, it made sense. But trying to get rid of defilements, trying to get rid of bad thoughts, trying to become pure as a person, the personality basically is an illusion. It's made up. But when I was a samanera, I had insight. I kept using a kind of conundrum. All conditions are impermanent. But is there something permanent? And then my educated mind said, well, the Buddha said everything is impermanent, so I take that as a statement of truth. Everything is impermanent. But then just to play with my mind, I said, is there something that's impermanent? So I had insight into letting go, into the second noble truth, letting go of desire. So I could really relate to Gama Danhas quite easily, sensual desire, and Bhava Danha was surprising because wanting to become seemed right, to want to become enlightened and be free from all suffering was something good. So wanting to attain enlightenment or nibbana, I began to see it as bhava-danha, desire to get something you don't have or feel you don't have. And then Vipavandanha, the desire to get rid of your defilements, your problems, your negative thoughts. Desire to get rid of sexual desire, desire to get rid of fear and doubt, and I realized how much of my life had been around this incredibly controlling tendency to want to get rid of things I didn't like. So that was quite an insight. Vipavandanha was a major insight for me during that year. And so then this conundrum, this koan, is there something permanent? And then the intellect would say, well, the Buddha said everything's impermanent, so it must be so. I began to see through that because the Buddha said everything is impermanent, maybe there's something permanent, just to play with my mind. And just by reflecting on this, I could see the impermanence of the body, of emotions, of feelings, of the senses. But is there something permanent? Then the question arose in my mind, what is aware of sankharas? What is aware of the ego? What is it that's aware of Gamadana, Bhavadana, Vipavandanha? Is that a sankhara? And then questioning, can one sankhara see another sankhara? And then the scriptures, the Buddha said, sankharas are like foam on the sea, like bubbles. They have no essence, no solidity, no permanent quality. So then realizing that language of the ego, I want to get enlightened, I want to conquer defilements, I began to see that was noble thinking, it's high-minded thinking, but it's also an illusion, because I think me as a person, as an individual person, can get enlightened. My personality will become enlightened, my emotions will become calm and perfect, and everything will be wonderful, is the idea of nibbana. And then during this time, I had used a lot of a mantra like letting go. I realized that the insight into the second noble truth is to let go of sankharas. So I practiced that. The last few months I was in this monastery in Nong Khai, letting go. And then when I let go of everything, I still was conscious, and I noticed what I refer to as the sound of silence. But it didn't seem like much. It's not like listening to Beethoven or something wonderful. It's rather boring. It's a continuous kind of vibration that you begin to recognize, and I thought it was a sound. That's why I named it Sound of Silence. But I noticed that even plugging up my ears, where I can't hear normal sounds, I could still notice this sound of silence, this peaceful vibration that seems to be ever present. And then I thought, well, it's impermanent like everything else, because the Buddha said so. But then I began to, as I reflected more deeply, I began to see that it wasn't something that came and go, would come and go. But sometimes my attention to it would come and go. My awareness would get caught up in wandering thoughts, and then I'd forget it. But as soon as I remembered it, I started noticing it again. So then I told myself to really grasp sound of silence like a samadhi practice. To just use that as a samadhi practice. But you can't grasp it. You can become obsessed with it, but then you're not mindful anymore. You don't notice it. So just by letting go, which is like relaxation. So the letting go, then the sound of silence would I notice it every time I let go of everything completely. And I began to question it. Is it a sound? Is it, but sounds come and go. Is it, and nobody really mentioned it before, so I didn't know what it was. But I noticed that when I relaxed into emptiness, into non-grasping, this silence I'd notice it. Suddenly I was in the silence. And over the many years with Luang Por Cha and here in England, the sound of silence is my refuge. At first, my personality, I didn't like it because it's boring. Silence, when your life is noisy and complex, you want silence, but how long can you enjoy silence without getting restless? And one of the last fetters before realizing Nibbana is restlessness. So restlessness is a realm that we experience through the body and the senses. These are, by nature, very restless phenomena. And we identify strongly with the body and with our feelings, our views and opinions. And so just trying to conquer restlessness from the ego, it doesn't work. You can't do it. It becomes, you kind of force it, you put a lot of effort to try to stop restlessness, which creates more restlessness. It's through total letting go. What kind of effort is total letting go? And you have the 6 efforts. So you think the effort of letting go is something you do, something you as a person, as a monk or nun, lay people just learn to let go of everything, which is true. But can the personality really let go of something? If you're always operating from conditioning, from thought, from trying to describe and define everything you experience. So I tried to find a reference to it in the suttas, the scriptures, but I didn't find any, so I thought it's not Buddhist. So that's another identity, that I'm a Theravadan Buddhist, and that limits me to just that alone. But who is it that is a Theravadan Buddhist? Is it my body? Is it through grasping Theravada Buddhism that I become a Buddhist, or and then you try to define Nibbana, and nobody can actually define it. So defining Nibbana, you try to make it sound incredibly pleasant, like blissful and forever blissful, which is very desirable, to be eternally blissful and not be reborn again. So I always assumed, it was easy to assume that right effort was in the Eightfold Path was something you did. You managed as a more refined form of effort. And then I began to realize that to realize the silence, the resonating ground of being, is total letting go of everything. So then the idea of I've let go of everything, or is this in the scriptures, or is it Buddhist, or all these kind of doubts vanished. And all you're left with is the silence. And then the restlessness of your nature, like your personality, your self-identity, your physical body, is a restless form in a restless world, like the planet Earth is a restless form. It's changing, You can't make the Earth and the solar system were impermanent according to some kind of scientific technology. Because the planet itself, the Earth that we believe in, is a stable experience. We noticed just listening to the news this morning about terrible landslides in New Guinea, and war in Sudan, and war in Ukraine, and war in Gaza, and you keep thinking, that this is proof of climate change, and a lot of people think that the climate isn't changing. But according to experience, the climate is a condition, changing depending on other conditions. It's natural to change. Can we seek perfection in the world that we live in? Can we become perfect men or women, perfect monks or nuns, perfect lay people, perfect citizens, and so the idea of being perfect is trying to impose a concept that is in contrast to the reality that we experience through the form, which is changing. So growing old to 90, is a natural phenomena. It's completely natural. That's the way conditioned phenomena operates. Born, grow up, get old, and die. So just by reminding oneself of this, that the universe we live in, it's a mystery. When we look at the sun and moon, the stars, the galaxies, they've been finding galaxies beyond galaxies, and it's mind-boggling when you try to think about it in terms of the limited intellect that we have as a human being, trying to figure out what is it all about. Did God create all this phenomena? And why does God allow all these wars and climate change and disasters and famine and human suffering? So then the word Dhamma, as I've spoken about many times, I began to not just see it in the abstract English definition of absolute reality, because those are kind of superlative English words, the absolute reality. But what is it? You know, how does absolute reality relate to this form, this 90-year-old body? You know, and it's something you take refuge in Dhamma. But what is it, you know? And we can kind of believe it's ultimate reality, absolute reality. These are the best English words we can use. But what is that? And what is absolute reality here and now? So Dhamma is apparent here and now and timeless. So what is apparent here and now and timeless is consciousness, which is something we're all experiencing. We all are conscious forms. And then in the Nibbana Sutta of the Buddha, in the Pali Canon, one of the first stanzas is almost impossible to understand from the Western intellectual thinking patterns. It's like the Heart Sutra in Mahayana Buddhism. To the Western-trained intellect, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But then you begin to change it through insight. You begin to realize that what is aware of the ego, what is aware of restlessness, what is aware of the body, what is aware of the emotions you experience, what is aware, and of course, consciousness, we apply the word conscious awareness, mindfulness, conscious awareness. But people in the Theravadan school oftentimes get confused with vijnana, the word vijnana, because it is impermanent in terms of the five khandhas: the body, the feelings, the memories, the emotions, the consciousness through the senses. So that makes sense. Consciousness through the senses themselves are impermanent. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. These, you know, as you grow older, they change. They degenerate. Like at 90 now, you know, just feel the aging process of a male body is like this. You know, so it's no, you know, no matter how many vitamins the monks give me or the exercise, you know, it still manages to just keep getting older and all kinds of unpleasant sensations arise in it. But absolute reality, or Dhamma, or on the gift package that we gave you all during this ceremony, was consciousness without feature, without end, radiant all around. Now that's what I've realized. That's in the scripture. That's in the Majjhima Nikaya. The first stanza of the Nibbana Sutta is, but everything is impermanent, and the sun, moon, and stars, the whole universal system is impermanent, but what is permanent is consciousness. Vinyanang anidasanang anantang sapado pavang. Because it doesn't change, it's stable, it's pure, it's non-personal. You try to identify with it. It's my practice is sound of silence, it's mine. Doesn't make sense. You lose all sense to define yourself and claim even insights that you remember over the years. So this is an incredible realization, to realize that there's absolutely nothing to worry about or fear, because what you realize is your true nature is the consciousness that you are right now, that you may not notice because you're always thinking, feeling through the senses, and we're culturally conditioned to identify with concepts, ideas, ideals. Rather than, it's through this gentle teaching of the Buddha. It's not a violent practice. It's not like you've got to get your effort and hold it there and keep it. But it's more like right effort is relaxed. Awareness here and now is like this. And then you begin to notice this vibration that is the very ground of being. Everything's in it. It's not just in my head or something, in the body. It's the body's in the silence. All of us at this moment are in the silence, in consciousness. The sun, moon, and stars, the galaxies beyond sight and vision, all kinds of imagined possibilities, forms of imagination, fantasy, or illusions that we might grasp, are all contained, manifest through consciousness. Consciousness is the very ground of being. And it's what we begin to realize for ourselves, that we're not just some separate form, like feeling separate all the time in terms of what we look like or our position in the Sangha or the society, whether you're male or female or monks or nuns or whatever. All these things are conventions. They're sankharas. But what you realize is that you're not a sankhara. Your true nature is pure conscious awareness, without feature, without end, radiant all around. And by developing awareness of silence, of letting go of everything, relaxing, you begin to prefer the silence to any form of sound. Because it's natural, it's uncreated, it's unformed, unoriginated. It's Dhamma, you can call it Dhamma, absolute reality, ultimate reality, whatever, but it doesn't really have a name. but it's apparent here and now and timeless. So this is my effort to share this kind of realization, because I really respect your efforts to live this life, the celibate life, and then and then for all the lay support that we get. The Amaravati is now very well supported, and this is quite, the idea of monastic life is like an alms mendicancy, to depend upon others for the requisites that are necessary for living as a human being on the planet. And here in the UK we have all kinds of benefits from governmental institutions and so forth to make our lives, quite pleasant, or at least where we can live as samanas, as alms mendicants. And then to have this realization in yourself, so that the whole point of alms mendicancy is not to just become dependent on others, but to give others a chance to support the endeavors we make to realize nirvana. So even in endeavors, some of efforts, in trying to explain this, it's full of contradictions. So in the intellect, then what do we do when we meditate? Just relax and take it easy and let go of everything. And then it's still the operating of the ego, isn't it? I must relax and let go. It's still the Sakyaditi fetter, the first obstruction to realization. So formal meditation practices are very helpful in the beginning, like mindfulness of the breath or concentration practices, samatha practices, can be very helpful. It gives us something to do with our restlessness. But the real insights come not through concentrating on an object, but by letting go of all objects. And that's why I revere the Four Noble Truths teaching, because I found that very, it gives all the necessary instructions, pointers in the right direction. So meditation techniques can be used, but after a while we can't use them anymore. They get in the way. But my encouragement is to really look at the ego. What is it that is aware of, I've got to practice hard, I've got to work hard, I've got to be perfect, I've got to be dependable, I've got to be, and all what we should or should not be is very prominent in our critical minds. We're full of ideas about what a good monk or nun should be. But we can be aware of that all the shoulds that we think, they're words. And that's why I encourage this observation of words, rather than just clinging to words, but actually even the mantra Bhutto is a word. So it's using Bhutto as a mantra helps in the beginning when the mind is trained to think all the time. Because most of us are educated and we've been, this is the information age, every information is available to almost everybody. There's strong views and opinions that people quarrel and fight over because they identify with what they think, like these conspiracy theories that some people grasp hold of. It's very, made up ideas about dark plots and dark forces, satanic forces, or evil forces, or things that, are rather scary. And so there's a lot of interest in this kind of thing, thinking there's something wrong with the universe we live in. That there's something wrong with the way you are, that you've got to set right. And it depends on, sometimes we blame other people for our weaknesses or faults. So it's very much a kind of blaming culture. I find just one of my first reactions is, who's to blame? And so blaming is, we want to find out something's gone wrong and who's to blame for it. And that's conditioned into us. If there's something wrong, it's somebody else, or maybe mea culpa, I'm to blame. So the ego will even expand to, I'm to blame for all the problems of climate change. I mean, that's taking it to total absurdity. But ultimate reality is radiant, blissful, peaceful. And death is not far from my experience. Rishi and I had never expected to live this long, but you realize to not be reborn again in these suffering forms. When you really examine your own body with awareness, not with vanity, but with awareness, you realize how delicate and unpleasant having a human form is. Its functions, just eating and defecating every day, and just these kind of gross functions that we perform every day that are quite natural. Where we get tired and worn out by work or too much effort. So these bodies, when we identify with them, we tend to not identify with their unpleasant functions, but with their youth, their appearance, their, vanity can be a great obstacle to be vain and just be concerned about how you look or your position in the society. So then you think, I'll try to be humble. A good bhikkhu is humble. So I'll try to be humble and not vain. And of course, you can be proud of being humble. So where do how can you change the phenomenal world that we experience through the senses, when it's full of contradictions about right and wrong, good and bad, everything is defined in critical terms, heaven and hell, true and false. But in consciousness without feature, without end, that function, the intellect, which is for critics criticizing, for labeling condition, labeling phenomena as good or bad, right or wrong, is no longer believable. You're no longer caught in the habits of blaming somebody else or yourself or the world you live in or the government or your parents. So sound of silence is apparent here and now and timeless. Ehipatiko, come and see for yourself. So it's like in the Dhamma, it's here and now. It's not something you get if you've been practicing meditation for years. It's suddenly waking up, the awakened teaching of Buddha. Wake up and just see. There's nothing to fear, nothing to worry about, nothing to become. Then we function. After realizing this, the ego says, well, what do I do with my life? Well, as a Buddhist monk, as a bhikkhu, it seemed quite natural. The conventional reality of monasticism is, and trained oneself for years with Vinaya and living in a form that you personally have not created. And then, as in my life here at Amaravati, then it's like just breathing and eating and sleeping and sharing what I know with the rest of you, and that's something that I'm quite glad to be doing. So I offer this as a reflection.